we discussed about monetary policy, then the time inconsistency issue, right, and credibility of central bank. So we made arguments, that policies can be conducted by rule, okay, either by being credible or by discretion. And the conclusion was, if the policies are conducted by rule, the efficiency is going to be much higher, okay, much higher. If the policies are conducted by discretion, the efficiency is going to be lower, or it can be even negative. Sometimes, if people's expectations are not going to match with policy expectations, okay? Policy expectations. All right. So the first discussion that we are going to do, we are considering changes in interest rate. Changes in interest rate. So let's suppose the economy is experiencing certain type of recession, okay? Or as we already discussed in our previous seminars, there are the cases where if investors expect negative or recession in the upcoming days or months, right? So they will try to reduce their autonomous investment, right? Autonomous investment. And when investors, they reduce their autonomous investment, and in our exercise, in our previous week, we said the God monetary policy was implemented, right? And by implementing monetary policy, central bank was able to reduce loss, yeah? Was able to reduce loss. At least not, it was able to reduce. Okay. So now let's suppose now central bank is planning to implement some expansionary policy, so where it is intending to reduce interest rate. Expansionary policy. And now we are expressing that the economy is described as the following model where GDP growth depends on some constant plus interest rate, and other control variables, and plus error term, other control variables. So if central bank decides to implement, expansionary policy, it is intending to affect positively on the growth, to make it grow, right? To make it grow. So therefore, they are trying to reduce interest rate. What's the purpose of reducing interest rate? And how does it affect positively for economic growth?
With lower interest rate, the company will borrow more money.
So it will affect both, it will increase money supply in the economy, right? So where it's for investors, it's easier, it's cheaper to borrow and invest for their companies. As a result, more job places will be created, more people will be paid, yes? And then more people will be consuming more. As a result, aggregate demand is going to increase because of investors, right? Action, and aggregate GDP will grow. Or in individual level, households, for them it's also borrowing is cheaper. So maybe they will be buying mortgages, which means overall that aggregate demand will grow. So the intention is like this, right? So as a result, let's suppose this model is built, and now it's the base of this building of model. It was based on perfectly nicely collected data. And now this model is very robust without any problems. Which means if this very good model, central bank is going to develop policies based on this beta. Yes? So they will expect. So now how much to reduce interest rate in order to reach that that goal of the economy. To grow the GDP by 3%, how much interest rate should be reduced? Based on this one, central bank, they reduce that interest rate in order to reach this target, okay? Usually we expect it like this, All right. But during the lecture we discussed, if central bank is not credible, okay, where it conducts its policies under discretion, so where the population household, they do not trust central bank, in that case, situation can be very different. For example, now we are kind of taking second condition. So what if public thinks that reduction in interest rates will cause a lot of inflation? Is it going to cause inflation? It will, right? Because higher demand, more money, it will definitely lead to higher, so inflation, higher prices. Okay, higher prices. Look, when central bank does this kind of changes in interest rate, they also expect that there will be certain level of inflation. All right. So this is central bank's inflation rate. Okay, we are going to reduce interest rate. Inflation will be somehow 3%. Let's suppose. Okay, considering this fact. But now, people, because of the not credibility of the central bank, their expectations are going to be very negative, right? The history showed that central bank was, telling, targeting certain percentage of inflation rate, but always it was different. So, but in here we are saying that people are expecting this expected inflation rate to be very high. Very high. All right, let's suppose this is the case, all right? This is the case. You may consider country example, for example. If you consider most of the developing nations, developing countries, you can say more than 95% of population, they are economically illiterate people. Why? Because they don't pay attention closely to those changes that government is doing. Whereas the government is, implementing expansionary monetary policy or fiscal policy. They don't pay attention. All right? But in some country cases, they pay attention. Even though they don't pay attention, media makes them to pay attention. Right? For example, in developed countries, what do they do? So the data based on this model, they target to reduce interest rate, let's suppose, by 5%. Right? By 5%. Immediately. So if they targeted then that that one should be proved by policy, right? Okay, then you can do it. Then it will be implemented. If it's implemented, if it's going to be implemented, then various economies, they will be expressing their opinions. So now, if the central bank is going to reduce it by 5%, it will cause the inflation to rise by this much, by that much. There will be arguments, which means it is now today all publicly available through media sources. Okay. So now let's consider the case a country where all people they rationally think.
They consider the changes like policy changes.
Yeah, now we are making that type of, okay? They all pay attention, okay? Now, because of that bad history with non-credibility of central bank, they expecting very high inflation rate. People believe it to be very high. All households, they have some cash in their pockets, right? If they expect inflation rate to be very high, what will they do with their cash?
They invest, they spend now.
So they try to get rid of this cash. They want to turn it into some liquid good or liquid currency, yes? First, reaction, in this case, people start buying goods. Yes? Buying goods. For example, what happened in Russia after the annexation of Crimea, then the sanctions were imposed, and then plus that supply of goods from those members were stopped. Okay, prices were going up. It's one, and another the oil price shock too. Inflation was going up, right? So households in Russia, they were expecting that inflation will be even higher. Now it's the best time to buy goods. So those department stores in Russia, you know, they were getting empty. And they were even, you know, moving to neighboring countries like Kazakhstan to buy the durable goods with those rubles, okay? All right. So if it happens, you know, now people are buying those goods because of panic. Very, very negative expectation about inflation. So which means, you know, it's in general, theoretically, we know if there is high demand for these goods,
Prices will increase.
prices will increase. If there is high demand, the suppliers, they will also supply, right? But if the situation is like this, supplying goods is not interesting for suppliers. It is unhealthy kind of situation, okay? Unhealthy. They also know now the price of this good that I'm selling will be maybe 3 times higher the next day. I'm selling it for $2 a day, the next day it can be $5. Okay? They also now in dilemma. So look, now prices are going up, then this panic is going to increase inflation even further. So now our intention with reduction of this one to grow this one, right? If you consider this economy is based on, let's suppose, export-dependent nation, increase in inflation is going to reduce our export, yes? Because goods in our country are expensive, because high inflation, right? So this expansionary policy, if the situation is going to be this type of, you know, in a bad form, it may lead even to recession further. Because people's expectations are very negative. Okay. Good. Second. If it's good, let's suppose, you know, they would like to convert it into cash. Other liquid currencies like US dollars, yeah? If they want to get rid of those cash that they have, there will be higher demand for foreign currency. As a result, US dollar is going to appreciate while currency, local currency is going to depreciate, right? To depreciate. All right. So if it happens, if our currency depreciates, how does it affect to the economy overall?
Or exports, you know.
Export may increase, right? Export may increase. Okay. May increase. And which category of people are, you know, really don't like these fluctuations in exchange rate? Investors, right? Investors. Investors totally don't like. And country, each economy, doesn't matter what type of economy is this, they don't want to have to develop some negative impression for the investors. If current local currency depreciates, if US dollar appreciates, it means that investors are really disadvantaged. Why? When they brought US dollars, they converted into that local currency. What they have is now local currency. If the local currency becomes weak and big, it will be able to buy less and less US dollars. So therefore, if government does not control the situation in the right time, okay, investors will react as pulling the investment from the country. If they pull the investment from the country, then what will happen? It will lead to exchange rate crisis. Then it means banks will be getting bankrupt one by one. And it will lead to financial crisis, which means recession. Okay? Therefore, what's the conclusion? If central bank wants to implement some expansionary policy, you can tell that it's going to be very effective under rule, commitment. If central bank is trusted, if they say it's going to be 3%, people will be expecting it to be 3%, not 20%. Alright? So therefore, the credibility of central bank is very important. Okay? So we discussed it. So now let's consider this one, which we also discussed during the lecture once again, alright, because it's important. So now the economy is described with Phillips curve, right? Where unemployment is inversely related with inflation, right? Natural level of unemployment minus alpha, actual inflation minus expected inflation. Expected inflation. So the economy is described by Phillips curve. Good. And now we will consider, so know that the central banks, the policy implementations, okay, under rule and under discretion. Whether when the central bank is committed, whether trusted, how it's going to affect the economy, and how is it going to affect under discretion. Because both unemployment and inflation causes negatively to the economy, right? So each economy has its loss function described by unemployment and inflation. So here we are considering loss, okay, which is described by the unemployment plus inflation. High unemployment, loss will be higher. High inflation, loss will be higher. Because high inflation always causes negative outcome to the economy. What about in the case of deflation? It will cause still negative. Deflation also not good thing.
Yes.
Okay? Both inflation and deflation, both are not desirable. The best, the optimal point of having is no inflation.
Isn't it 2%? Isn't it 2% inflation?
Now we will consider. That point we will consider with the next exercise, okay? Sometimes it's good. So here, the loss can be minimized if it is 0, right? Okay? So now, under commitment, central bank is credible. Credible. Let's suppose if central bank, if they targeting inflation target is going to be 0%, if the central bank is going to be 0%, the announcement. So the expected inflation is going to be 0. Because central bank is credible, they will think that if central bank is set, they will follow it. Alright? So then you can easily find unemployment is going to be equal to natural level. Why? Because the actual inflation and expected inflation is equal. Right? If, as in the case of our previous discussion, if central bank is planning, to implement expansionary policy, and they know that it's going to lead to inflation, and they would announce that inflation is going to be 3%. 3%. Because the central bank is credible, also people's expectations are going to be 3%. Alright? Natural level. So which is good thing? Which is good. What about under discretion? Under discretion. Now people don't trust central bank. Okay? Even though they trust, they partially trust. So where this actual inflation is not anymore equal to expected inflation. Okay? So now there is a dilemma under discretion. For central bank, under discretion, central bank should find one optimal inflation level, which means that whatever policy is going to happen, it should lead to this much inflation. Expansionary policy, let's suppose. This much. where this inflation is going to be the central bank's target inflation, okay? And people's expectations are going to be equal to this one. Alright? So they will expect, but central bank should do some research to find one level of expected that inflation which is going to match with expectations of households. Okay? In the previous case, it automatically will match, but here now some research should be done. So which we can find using the loss function and Phillips curve. Okay? Where in Phillips loss function unemployment contains these factors, right? We can include where, let me write it in here. So loss function is equal to natural level of unemployment minus alpha, actual inflation minus expected inflation, plus lambda inflation, actual inflation in the power of 2 squared.
So we minimize loss here?
So right. So now, if you look at on the right hand side of this equation, natural level of unemployment, we have actual inflation and expected inflation, right? To which of these factors can central bank directly affect? Central bank can affect directly to only inflation, right? It cannot directly affect on expected inflation because it's not credible. And it's not able to directly affect on unemployment. It can affect indirectly through inflation. Okay? Through inflation. Therefore, what can central bank affect is on inflation. So now central bank should change inflation, right? And with that change should minimize loss. So therefore, if we take first difference of this equation with respect to inflation, so change in loss with respect to inflation, which is equal to, so this constant is equal to 0 minus alpha, right? First difference of pi is equal to 1 minus or plus alpha is going to be 0 times it's 0 plus 2 lambda pi, right? Okay. Which level of loss is the most optimal?
0. No loss.
No loss, yes, 0. So which is going to give us that optimal level of inflation, alright? So no loss. If it's no loss, then it's equal to minus alpha plus 2 lambda pi. And from here you can find that inflation pi actually is equal to alpha over 2 lambda. Which is, this pi is called optimal inflation rate, okay? Which means if these models are perfectly built, central bank can find this optimal inflation and form that expansionary policy based on this inflation rate. They will target this one. Why? Because it's going to match people's expectation. So it must be actual inflation of central bank, which is going to match with household expectations. Okay? Household expectation. Which means if it's the case, if central bank reached this optimal point, then unemployment is going to be equal to minus alpha. Actual inflation is equal to alpha over 2 lambda minus alpha over 2 lambda, which is equal to natural level of unemployment. Okay, best outcome. But if you compare, for example, this outcome and under the discretion and under rule, so it can be reached without inflation, natural level, while under discretion it is always reached this natural level with inflation. Okay, with inflation. Okay, good. So now exercise 2. Exercise 2. So now again, the economy is described with the Phillips curve, okay, which is now unemployment is equal to a natural level of unemployment, which is now 5% minus 0.5, actual inflation minus expected inflation. And the loss function for this economy is also given that loss is equal to unemployment plus 0.05 times pi squared. So now, central bank is in this economy, central bank is credible. Okay, now under this, it's credible. Everyone believes whatever they say, they will follow. Central bank assumption is credible. And now they are targeting inflation. So now they are thinking whether they are going to target 5% inflation, all right, in the first case. 5% inflation targeting, or in the second option is targeting 0% inflation.
So it doesn't matter here, right?
No, it matters. So Lord, central bank may, let's suppose here it's now 5%, okay, as the gentleman said, 2%, let's suppose, okay. Does inflation have some positive effect on the economy?
Could be.
It does, yes, it does. Because with inflation, we are able to effect on people's minds, right? For example, government, if, let's suppose, they know that 2% inflation is, somehow an acceptable good level of inflation, where wages can be increased, yes, and that government definitely know it's going to lead to inflation. Wages are going to increase in nominal terms, right?
Yeah.
They will increase. Let's suppose if the wage was $10,000, okay, and wage increased to $10,100, and this one definitely expected, it's going to cause 1% inflation rate. Wages increase and inflation is 1% increase, which is, in nominal terms is, in real terms is nothing changed, yes?
Sticky wages.
Same. But it will affect, on people's consumption behavior. Why? Last month they were receiving $10,000, but now it's $100 more. Because now they feel they are richer. As a result, they will be consuming more. If they consume more, economy will be growing a little faster. Maybe, for example, in this exercise, this 5% increase in inflation is, let's suppose, healthy inflation. Let's suppose, okay? And there is banking thinking whether to keep it 0 inflation or 5%. So now, first, if central bank commits to target 5% inflation, okay, what is going to be expected inflation? 5%. Because now central bank is committing, right? Central bank announced that inflation is going to be 5%. It will be 5%. Because people, they trust central bank, they expect that inflation is going to be also 5%. So if they form the expectations like this, and how is this policy, if say here central bank is really keeping their promise, okay, and how is it going to affect on unemployment, which is expressed with Phillips curve, right? So where unemployment is equal to natural level of unemployment, which is 5%, and minus 0.5 times actual inflation is 5%, expected inflation is also 5%. So now this is equal to 0 and unemployment is equal to 5, which is natural level of unemployment. Okay, this is good thing. Alright? Because both inflation and unemployment causes loss. Because there is unemployment and there is inflation, there is loss. So now you can find what loss is equal to for this economy under these policies, okay? Loss is equal to, unemployment is equal to 5 plus 0.05, actual inflation is 5% squared, which is equal to 6.25, okay? So this is the outcome. Natural level is reached, 5%, and there is loss, because there is inflation and unemployment, okay? Good. So, now in the second case, in the first case, now they are targeting 5%. If the outcome is going to be like this, all right? What about the second one? Now they are planning to target zero inflation. In the second case. So now they are going to make it 0%. If it's 0%, expectations of households will be also 0%. And unemployment in this case is going to be equal to natural level, which is 5% minus 0.5. Actual inflation is 0, and expected is 0, which means it's equal to 5. Same outcome, right? Same outcome. Why it's same outcome? Because central bank is credible. Next, regarding the loss, where there is unemployment, which is 5, right? Plus 0.05, actual inflation is equal to 0, 0 squared, which is 0, so loss is equal to 5. So if you compare these two outcomes, right? Two outcomes, which outcome is better? Natural level in both cases is reached, while loss is much lower. Okay, much lower. So now the conclusion is, now in here it's better. Out. Good. So now next, suppose the central bank chooses a target, they are targeting zero inflation, okay? Central bank is credible at this point. So this is now, you will see. So where actual inflation was 0, they were targeting 0. Because it was 0, central bank is credible. People's expectation was formed as 0, right? People, they already formed the expectations. But now, central bank surprised them with 5% inflation. Okay? What's going to happen? Which means that in inflation, which is supposed to be 0, where people, they believe, it became unexpectedly 5%. Okay? In this case, what is going to be unemployment rate in the economy, where natural level is 5 minus 0.5. Actual inflation now is 5 because it was surprise, while the expectation was 0, right? Okay. So which is equal to 2.5. If you find loss, where unemployment is now lower, 2.5, yes, plus our 0.05 times actual inflation is 5 squared, which is equal to 3.75. Okay? 3.75. Now you can compare these three. So in the last one, you can see that the lowest level of unemployment and the lowest level of loss.
But the credibility of central bank decreases.
Right. Okay, good. So which means that if you make a conclusion, okay, critically thinking, which outcome is the best here? Second. Second, right? Why? Even though now it is, this kind of outcome, very nice outcome, it is very temporary, short time outcome. In the middle run and long run, people will not trust central bank anymore. Let's suppose if central bank is really saying we are going to keep, let's say 3% inflation because of this bad experience, this expected inflation is going to be maybe 10%. Or they will expect, if they, when they said 0, they made it 5, maybe they will surprise that it was going to be 8. If it's going to be 8, so where if it's 3 and if it's 8, which is if you sub it negative, it will become plus, unemployment will be higher. Okay? So therefore, because of that one, that losing credibility is very bad. And we discussed during the lecture about business cycle, political business cycle.
Yes.
We said politicians, they try to manipulate the economy, so when it's election time, the economy looks very nice. Yes? If that politician is very selfish, okay, he can apply this type of policies. Just before election, all right? Even though central bank is very credible, they can surprise households with 5% inflation. When it's election time, unemployment is in its historical low level. Loss is also historical low level. General population, they only understand the numbers. They don't understand about the consequences, okay? So which means that this candidate is going to have more votes because of these policies. After that one, credibility of central bank is lost. Okay? All right. So next, now we have empirical. We discussed it. Okay. Empirical example. Who wanted the euro? Euro. Hold on. In late 1970s, you know that European countries, they established European monetary system, yes? What was the reason for establishing European monetary system?
The crash of Bretton Woods standard?
Yes, because in early 1970s, right? Early, that Bretton Woods agreement stopped operating. Why? It was convertible to gold, and the President Nixon, with his that decision, if they don't stop this kind of convertibility of the US dollar, that Treasury of the US will lose all of its gold expectations. So then they stopped, which means at this time that US dollar was world currency, yes, and all countries, they converted their currency to this dollar and they were trading based on this one. Now it has no more gold value, okay? So therefore it was one reason why European countries, they made this system. In order to re-establish their, stable trade between those countries. As a result, they, made that German franc as the benchmark currency, and all other European countries, they pegged their currency to this franc. And then it's like fixed exchange rate, they were trading. Okay? And when they established, they were planning, okay, step by step, to make European, okay? They were planning. And it happened in 1999, yes? In 1999, they accepted that euro as that currency. Before making it one single currency, all right, all European countries, okay, there were some countries they were willing to make a single currency. Some of them they were less willing, and some of them they were not willing. All right, based on this willingness to join to make one single currency, there was survey conducted. And they conducted the survey with, with the relationship of, with the history of inflation. For all those, EU, that Eurozone, they calculated the average inflation. Since the establishment of the European monetary system, okay? So now in here you can see numbers given. inflation. Okay? Austria, average inflation rate was 4.47%. Belgium, for example, 5.89%. Germany, 10.79%. Italy, 12.13%. Okay? And then they were asking people, okay, journalists, politicians, whether they are willing to join this one. And now you can see, for example, in here, when they asked 100 people, 90 people, they said, we would like to join. Less than one, yes? Regarding, in Italy, for example, when they asked 5 people, when one person said no, 5 people, they were willing to join. Okay? And now you can see, countries with higher inflation history, they were saying more likely to, they were willing to join. Germany too, right? There was more willingness to make that single currency area. Why? Why? If you consider Italy, right? Where 12.13 average for about more than 20 years average, okay? Which means there were years when inflation was over 30%. Some years was less than this one. Average was like this. Which means central bank was not properly or not able to control inflation in its optimal level, okay? Which means that central bank was conducting the rule under discretion. So therefore Italians, which are tired, let's suppose, of the central bank's actions, they wanted to make one single currency, which is going to be single currency of all members, all right, which are not going to allow central bank of Italy to practice discretion. Okay? Because change in one country is going to affect all other countries, right? So therefore, all other countries will not allow to manipulate those policies. Their hands are tied. So therefore, you can see that it was that outcome. So then researchers try to find what the regression outcomes, all right? And now, based on regression outcome, you can see indeed that inflation was positively okay. So there was higher the inflation, more likelihood of saying yes, joining. And now you can see that R squared adjusted, which is 35%. What does it mean?
The model is the variable described the model by 35%.
Yes. In other words, people's willingness, okay, 35% of their willingness to say yes is, explained by inflation. There are other factors too. Some other factors which are, for example, they don't want to make it because they dislike some, nations. Okay, other factors. So, and now in here, what do you think? If this inflation rate, which you have already seen, if those inflations were even higher, what kind of inflation adjusted R squared are you going to expect? Is it going to be larger or smaller?
No.
It must be larger, right? Because if it's higher, they're even more unstable. So researchers, they try to, they inflate it even further. So they gave the square power of 2. When they did it, the result turned out to be, it now explains 45%. Then they do, what if it's even larger? So now it explains 63% of people's willingness to make one single currency, okay? So this is now, you can consider, if this is the research outcome, if you are going to do this kind of research, okay, based on your dissertations or whatever, it means robustness check. The hypothesis that you are doing is really, supported. by this one. Robustness check. Good.